Welcome to The Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we're going to tear into something pretty incredible. We're embarking on a journey to totally demystify one of the coolest pieces of engineering in the modern world, the internal combustion engine. We're going to look at it from the inside out, exploring the raw physics, those elegant mechanical designs, and the clever innovations that make motorcycles such exhilarating machines to ride. So, whether you're a seasoned rider, or just someone who loves knowing how things work, we're going to build an engine together in your mind today, piece by piece. Let's get started.
Ever wonder how an engine turns raw fuel into 19,000 RPMs of pure adrenaline? I mean, it's a fantastic question, isn't it? You twist that grip on the handlebars and suddenly, boom, you're propelled forward with tremendous force. But beneath that really simple action lies a wild symphony of controlled explosions, ultra-precise fuel delivery, and high-speed mechanical ballet. Today, we're going to break down exactly how that mechanical magic happens.
All right, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap. 1. The core of combustor. 2. Two-stroke versus four-stroke. 3. Feeding the engine with fuel. 4. The engine's lifeblood. And finally, 5. Why motorcycles rev so high.
Section 1. The core of combustion, the spark of life.
Okay, let's strip away the fairings, pull off the exhaust, toss the electronics aside, and just focus our attention on the absolute dead center of the engine, the cylinder and the piston. Now, before we talk mechanics, we gotta talk physics. The fundamental principle here is actually brilliantly simple. When you take a confined gas and heat it up, in this case by igniting a perfectly mixed ratio of fuel and air, those gas molecules get super excited. They start zooming around, colliding with each other and the cylinder walls at just incredibly high speeds. And this creates a massive spike in pressure. Since the cylinder is completely sealed at the top, that immense pressure has only one place to go, right? It pushes the movable piston downward. So, the absolute crucial takeaway here is that this simple, violent expansion of hot gas is the exact force that pushes a connecting rod, turns a crankshaft, and eventually spins your rear wheel.
So how do we repeatedly harness that incredible physics experiment? We do it using the classic four-stroke cycle. You might actually remember the old high school shop class mnemonic for this: suck, squeeze, bang, blow. First up, the intake stroke, or suck. The intake valve opens, the piston moves down, and that creates a vacuum that literally pulls in the fresh fuel-air mixture. Second is compression, or squeeze. The valve snaps shut, the piston rises back up, and highly compresses that mixture. Third is power, the bang. The spark plug fires, igniting that compressed mixture. The pressure spikes roughly 7 times higher, driving the piston down with massive force to turn the crank. And finally, exhaust, or blow. The exhaust valve opens, the piston rises again, and it just pushes all those burned gases right out. What's crazy is that this entire cycle requires 2 full rotations of the crankshaft to complete just a single power stroke.
Moving along to section 2. Two-stroke versus four-stroke. The battle of the strokes.
So, we just looked at the four-stroke cycle, which uses separate strokes for intake and exhaust, right? It requires complex valves and cams at the top, while the crank just sits in a nice little oil bath below. But then there's another totally fascinating architecture, the two-stroke. It's kind of magical. It creates power on every single downstroke by utilizing the volume both above and below the piston. As the piston moves up, it sucks fuel into the crankcase, and as it gets slammed down from combustion, it pushes that fresh mix up into the cylinder, effectively flushing the old exhaust right out. The whole shebang, all 4 phases, happens in just one up and down motion. And since that crankcase is full of fuel, you actually have to mix oil directly into the gas to keep things lubricated.
So, what do these mechanical differences actually mean for you, especially if you're an off-road dirt rider? Well, four-strokes, because of that longer power cycle and heavier flywheels, they deliver excellent low RPM torque. The power delivery is linear, it's predictable, which is absolutely fantastic for finding traction. They also offer a ton of engine braking and run a lot cleaner. The downside, they're heavier and definitely more complex to rebuild. Two-strokes, on the other hand, fire twice as often. This gives the bike a really light, almost under-stressed feel that a lot of riders just absolutely swear by. They're incredibly simple mechanically, no heavy valves or cams to worry about. But they do rely on a large, easily dented expansion chamber exhaust to help pull gases through the engine. And while they are a total breeze to rebuild right on your garage workbench, you are going to have to do that service a lot more frequently.
Section 3. Feeding the engine. Fuel. Carburetors versus fuel injection. Okay, so now that we've mastered the cylinder, we need to zoom out a bit. How do we supply that perfectly balanced, absolutely crucial air-fuel mixture to the engine in the first place? Well, we've got 2 main contenders. First, the traditional carburetor.
It relies on straightforward physics, specifically gravity and the vacuum created by the engine itself. As air rushes through a narrowed tube called a venturi, it basically sucks fuel right out of a bowl and mixes it into a vapor. It's an ingenious, simple design and super DIY friendly, but it's mechanically fixed. It can't dynamically adapt to changing conditions, which definitely leads to lower fuel efficiency. Fuel injection, though, that is a marvel of modern electronics. An engine control unit, or ECU, is constantly reading data from a bunch of sensors and precisely dictating exactly when and exactly how much fuel and injectors should spray directly into the intake. It's way more complex, requires specialized tools to fix, but man, it offers vastly superior fuel efficiency.
Honestly, the sheer efficiency of fuel injection is exactly why basically all modern vehicles have universally adopted it. Because it can calculate the precise air-to-fuel ratio on the fly, it pretty much guarantees complete combustion. Like, if you ride up a mountain where the air gets thin, the fuel injection just automatically adjusts to the changing atmospheric pressure. No more pulling over to manually adjust carburetor jets on the side of the trail. It also gives you totally reliable cold starts without ever having to fiddle with a manual choke. And because the combustion is just so complete, it significantly lowers harmful carbon emissions.
But hey, don't count the carburetor out completely just yet. Despite being totally obsolete in new cars, they still heavily reign supreme in small engines, lawnmowers, and older motorcycles. Their cheap manufacturing cost, plus the fact that you can rebuild an entire carburetor on your workbench with just a can of cleaner and some basic hand tools, that means they're going to be a staple in home garages for decades to come.
Section 4. The engine's lifeblood, keeping friction at bay.
So we've built this beast of an engine that can ignite fuel and create massive power. But without a lubrication system, the intense heat and friction of bare metal sliding on bare metal would cause the whole thing to literally fuse together and destroy itself in just a matter of minutes. Think of the lubrication system just like human biology, and this brilliantly illustrates it. The oil is the lifeblood, carrying away heat and reducing wear. The oil pump is the beating heart, pushing that fluid around. And the oil filter acts just like your lungs and kidneys, constantly purifying the oil so it can keep doing its job.
So how do engineers actually ensure these metal parts don't weld themselves together at thousands of RPMs? They've come up with a few clever systems. As we learned earlier, the petrol system is used in 2 strokes, where about 3 to 6% oil is just mixed right into the gas itself. Then, for smaller, cheaper 4-stroke engines, you've got the splash system. Literally just a little scoop on the connecting rod, flinging oil around the inside of the engine using centrifugal force. Simple, right? Larger engines step it up to a pressure system where oil is actively pumped through galleries directly into the bearings. High-performance machines, they might use a dry sump, which uses multiple pumps to scavenge oil to and from a totally separate remote reservoir tank. But for most standard motorcycles and cars, you'll find the wet sump. That's where the oil just pools in a pan at the very bottom of the engine, ready to be pumped back to the top. Now here's a crazy number to put this all into perspective. Using high-quality lubricants isn't just a casual suggestion. It actively removes heat and prevents degradation. Staying on top with your oil changes can literally give your engine up to 100,000 miles of extra life. That translates directly to incredible long-term performance and, honestly, massive financial savings for you down the road. Section 5. Why motorcycles rev so high? The performance climax. All right, we have arrived at the climax of our explainer. We know how these engines work, but why do motorcycle engines behave so radically differently than car engines? Why do they sound like screaming race cars? Well, the secret lies in the geometry of the cylinder. Motorcycles are small and light, which means they have physically smaller engines than cars. And because small pistons just don't suck in as much air per stroke, they naturally lack low-end torque. Now remember, horsepower is a function of torque multiplied by engine speed. So if you want big horsepower out of a tiny engine, you absolutely must spin it faster. Engineers pull this off by using what's called over-square pistons. This basically means the piston is wider than the distance it actually travels up and down. Because that stroke is so short, the piston doesn't have to move as fast vertically to complete a cycle. And lower vertical speeds mean way less stress on the internal parts, which allows the engine to safely reach those incredibly high RPMs. To see just how extreme this geometry can actually get, take a look at the 1990 Honda CBR 250RR. It redlines at an absolutely insane 19,000 RPM. To put that into perspective, if you're sitting at full throttle, that tiny engine is completing over 300 full revolutions every single second. It's a complete engineering marvel that produces a sound that is just pure music to any gearhead. Now, obviously, you can't just spin a sports bike engine to 14,000 or 19,000 RPM without it instantly blowing up, unless you use some serious engineering tricks. First, everything inside, especially the crank and pistons, has to be made incredibly light to reduce inertia. Also, the springs that snap the valve shut, they have to be extra stiff. If they aren't, you get something called valve float, where the valves physically can't close fast enough to get out of the piston's way, and that results in a catastrophic collision. Engineers also use straight, vertical electronic fuel injection inlets, and they pack more but smaller valves into that wide over-square cylinder head to ensure massive, rapid airflow. It is a literal masterclass in precision manufacturing.
Wow, we've covered a ton of ground today. We went through the explosive physics of combustion, those ingenious design differences between 2 and 4 strokes, the unbelievable precision of fuel injection, the life-saving flow of oil, and the high-revving geometry of over-square pistons. So next time you twist the throttle, or honestly even just hear a bike roar past you on the street, which of these hidden mechanical systems will you be appreciating the most? Think about that invisible ballet of metal and fire happening right beneath the rider. Thank you so much for joining me on this mechanical deep dive today. Keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.